Everyone, and let me welcome you to the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting of the 17th of May. I declare this meeting open at 9 a.m. and I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcast and audio recorded. I remind attendees to take necessary safety precautions and for members of the gallery to put their phones on silent. Or I will eject you if it rings, just to make it spicy, really spicy. Councillors, I don't have any leaves of absence today, noting that Councillor Kransky is joining us electronically. Thank you, Councillor Kransky. She's being very disciplined as a potential close contact of a positive COVID case. Yes, Madam Chair. No, sorry, yes, Madam Councillor Lane, sorry.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'll actually be departing at 10 a.m. to attend a funeral of a local resident. Understood. Thank you, Councillor Lane, for letting us know. Councillors, I'll move straight into item 4.1, which is a deputation for the funding of membership of Council of Mayors. Before I move into discussions, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare at this time? There being none, I'll now refer to the Director of Innovation and City Transformation, Dr. Scott Burke, to please enter discussions, and then we'll move into and introduce ComSec, and then we'll vote to move into confidential.
Through the Chair, thank you. Good morning, councillors. I'm actually going to pass in the first instance to my colleague Kirsten, is the program leader, to make the introductions. Thanks, Kirsten.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. I would like to introduce to you the Chief Executive Officer of ComSec, Scott Smith, and his stakeholder relations guru, Matt Hendry.
Guru.
You never knew you were guru, did you?
No, I didn't. I've been called many things. Councillor Raven wants to comment on.
Oh, no, I want to be a guru too, but if you want to talk, you've got to press the microphone button.
Sorry.
So without further ado, I think it'd probably be wise for them to go straight to their presentation, and then following the presentation, Council can consider the recommendations in the report.
All good. Councillors, I note that item 4.1 is a confidential deputation that is being presented by ComSec. Before we open discussion, do any councillors have any conflicts? You do not. It's considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into closed session as the information in the confidential report relates to councillors' budget. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Would someone like to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Russell. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Hall.
Against.
And Councillor Bannon.
Against.
And Councillor Lane.
Against.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Crancy had her hand up. I just didn't check, but I know that she wants to move into confidential. Thank you, councillors. The motion to close the meeting has now been displayed on the screen, and we will move into confidential, noting that audio recording will continue for record-taking purposes, but the video stream will stop. Councillors, we're back in open session, and there will be a motion on the screen momentarily. Confidential will be treated, but there's no decision in that. We just need to table the PowerPoint. So, councillors, we have the motion to table the PowerPoint presentation and keep it in confidential. Can someone move that for me, please? Thank you, Councillor Stemp. Seconded by Councillor Bradley. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Hall. How do you vote?
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. That was against. Do we have another motion? Yep, sweet. Now we have the motion relating to the presentation and the decision moving forward, that we thank ComSec for their presentation and that the council's resignation from ComSec be withdrawn, but that we continue to monitor their performance with annual assessments from the advocacy program. Would someone like to move that motion? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Bradley. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much, councillors. Councillors, we'll now move on to item 4.2, which is City of Choice Phase 3. Before we move into discussions, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare at this time? There being none, I'll now refer to the Advocacy Program Leader, Kirsten Pietzner, to speak to her report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Mr. Chair, just to go back in history a bit, it was a decision of council back around in February last year to take City of Choice Phase 3 for it to become a sort of a think tank focused on jobs and job pathways supported by the 3 levels of government. We set up a steering committee. They asked us to write to the state and federal governments seeking their support for a 3rd phase of City of Choice. We really didn't get that support from the state and federal governments. At the same time, parallel to that, we did get the City Deal, which offers a partial solution to achieving the City of Choice objectives of providing a forum for 3 levels of government to collaborate on the initiatives. So in light of the fact that we did not receive support for a Phase 3 of the City of Choice initiative, and the SEQ City Deal is now been signed, it's our recommendation that we suspend the City of Choice and develop an alternative approach. So fundamentally, we really do believe that there is a need for a replacement initiative for City of Choice that really looks at decision making on a 10 to 15 year time horizon. That is really about achieving transformational change within the city. From a point of view of how that would operate, it would comprise a portfolio of projects rather than a single initiative. They can be both current projects that council is already working on or new projects. Importantly, it would also, those projects would be linked to, I guess, key metrics or measures of that council is aiming to seek transformational change in. So some of those measures might relate to economic measures around employment, around types of industry and development of industry. It can be environmental measures around things like green space or river health. It can be social measures like things like access to health services, access to recreation, sport and leisure facilities. But by having those metrics, you provide yourself with a clear focus for where you want to achieve that transformational change. You can provide yourself with milestones along the way in terms of achieving that transformational change. And because you're actually focusing on outcomes, you can also have a very innovative way in actually trying to achieve that transformational change. And therefore, the initiative can also include a think tank component aimed at developing new approaches to solving intractable problems and also realising big opportunities. You can also have a co-design element to that where community, business and other leaders participate in trying to devise those solutions, and the state and federal governments can still participate in those initiatives if they wish to. So it's really about, and we're using notionally the term Transform Logan as an umbrella portfolio. All the projects will be linked to the corporate plan using standard corporate processes, so it's not separate to the day-to-day business of what council is doing. And council funding and resourcing for projects would be dealt with through normal budgetary processes. With any external resourcing, we would seek to access through advocacy efforts. Just to emphasise that today we're not seeking necessarily the endorsement of a specific initiative, but instead that council or the CEO be asked to lead the development of this initiative, and that a more detailed proposal be presented in November. And then council can make a decision at that point. We would also emphasise that this initiative wouldn't be developed in isolation from council's own views about what the priority metrics should be and what the project should be and how the whole initiative should operate. It's more about seeking your endorsement at this point to suspend the City of Choice initiative and put the resources and effort of council into developing an alternative approach to actually achieving transformational change within Logan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kirsten. I have a question from Councillor Stem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm just trying to get my head around, obviously various branches have their own metrics, which we sort of see come through in reports and so forth. So how is this different? Like is this pulling all those together, or is it external metrics? I'm just trying to get my head around exactly what this is providing that we don't already have.
I think it would be the clarity of that and making clear which is those priorities that the whole of council resources are directed towards. One of the things I think that council is aiming to achieve is a more integrated approach across council in terms of how it's working together across the various branches. So one of the things that you can look at, for example, is you might have an environmental metric, which is within the health and environment and water area. But when you want to elevate that up, you can then look at it and say, well, how do all the various branches potentially have projects that can come together to help deliver on that metric? Same with economics, same with social. So that you're not actually having a branch metric, you're having a corporate metric of which all of the branches and all of the resources of council can be looked at and evaluated in terms of how should we be prioritising this and how can we work together as council to achieve this, but also how can we engage with external stakeholders, not just you might be other advocacy groups, but also state and federal departments. It might be philanthropic organisations. There might be a range of organisations that council could work with that also are directing their resources to achieving that metric, because it's a city metric as opposed to a council metric.
All right, thank you. I look forward to hearing more.
Thank you, Councillor Stem. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm supportive of suspending. I'm curious about the second part that you referred to, which I'm taking on board is more of a project management type focus. Am I right in thinking that?
That is certainly part of the aspect of it.
Because I certainly am having issues, and I'm seeing the CEO next week, with exactly that, just more the overarching, like I have a helicopter view and I can see all the pieces of the puzzle, but it's getting that coordinated that is the issue. So is that really what you're doing, what you are proposing? Because
I think what we're proposing would help achieve that. So there's the project manager, which is the mechanics of how it is that people put together a project and council actually endorses what that project, where their funding and investment and effort should go.
yeah,
By having these metrics, what that does is it helps you make that decision in terms of where your priorities should be. So it's about saying...
Now you've lost me.
Sorry? Well,
Now
say for example, you decide that what you would like to do is you would like to reduce youth unemployment by half over the next 10 years. That's just a notional idea. And then you start to say to your branches, how are we going to actually start to achieve that metric? And it may be that part of the reason why youth unemployment is high is because youth is disengaged. So then you can start to look at how are you going to engage youth and what projects might contribute to that. But it's about trying to say, put the projects that council invests in the context of achieving change within, or positive change within the community. At the moment, one of the reasons why you're having difficulty potentially in understanding all the varied projects and things that are happening is there's no way of actually bringing that together in a way that you can actually analyse and say, this is what we're aiming to achieve. Have we got enough investment in that? Have we got projects that are actually going to achieve that? The mechanisms by which you manage that, which is about things like milestones and reporting and those sorts of things, they're necessary for it, but it's not really about that. It's more about trying to identify the priorities and helping you allocate and decide on projects that would help you achieve those priorities.
I appreciate what you're saying. I'm not sure I'm supportive of what you're trying to achieve. It just sounds a bit too, yes.
It always sounds airy-fairy until you start to get down to, we want to achieve this, how are we going to do it? And then some of those things that you want to achieve, you can't achieve in 1 year or 2 years. Some of those have to require a sustained effort over 10 to 15 years in order to achieve. And that's, I think, where the essence of it is.
My concern is who determines what the overarching, what the objectives are, etc. That's my concern. But I'll just park my curious mind for a while, but I'm happy to suspend.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I have Councillor Karansky, then Councillor Hall. Thank you, Councillor Karansky. Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Through the chair, is council not already doing these things? Like, do we not already have existing programs that are achieving these outcomes, the outcomes that this would?
I think the difficulty is to actually, how would I put it, make clearer what those particular priorities are and what those metrics are in a way that can enable a better communication of that, but also enable a better collaboration between the various parts of council in terms of achieving what those key attributes are. I think it's important to emphasise as well the time frame within which we are talking about, which is a 10 to 15 year time frame. And sometimes potentially the decisions and the opportunities that are being put forward are more in that short to medium term time frame of 2 to 3 years, or maybe even 3 to 5 years. So when we're thinking about in terms of what this initiative is, we focused a little bit on what the measures might be, but also I think it's important to understand what the time frame might be in terms of achieving transformational change. So there are certain projects that are happening. I can think, for example, of the CoLab projects and the City Studio and the Catapult programs, which are about trying to achieve transformational change from an entrepreneurial and innovation perspective. But how are we measuring that change, and how in terms of the city and how the city is being transformed over a period of time to make transparent to the community what the benefits of those initiatives are, and to help ensure a sustained effort by council over the period of time necessary to achieve change. So if you look at something like the Catapult program, you might have 14, 15-year-olds going through that program, but the change you won't see in that, in terms of the job opportunity they have and the business they establish, you might not see them for 7 to 10 years until they actually graduate from school and to actually enter into the workforce.
Did you want to speak? Sorry, the director wants to speak to it as well.
Council Hall, one of the major benefits of the approach that the CEO is proposing is going to provide council with the opportunity to actually agree on what the targets are going to be for those in those key metric areas, those key performance indication areas that council actually would be shooting for over the longer term, so 10 to 15 year time horizon. We currently don't have an agreed set of metrics at a city level with targets that would form the basis, if you like, of that program. And one of the other benefits of choosing metrics which will allow the potential for comparison with other cities is it gives us an understanding not just as to the progress we're making as a city, but it also allows us, if we so choose, to be able to benchmark our performance in some of those important areas against other cities.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I have Mayor Power, Councillor Heremiah and Deputy Mayor Wilcox.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. When this first original started, I was heavily involved, probably certainly supported the program and saw a lot of success. I would say the success diminished once the original chair was no longer at the helm. So I think where we're at the moment is to venture any further. We really need a very, very strong individual, someone who knows how to be successful and knows the channels. I would have liked to have seen this report next round, only because we've got a federal election, and that could change dramatically how we approach this. I don't know the outcome of that, so we'll just have to wait. What I will say is that the dynamics of the city have changed, the council has changed, and we certainly have different goals. We're certainly more environmentally concerned. Interesting enough, some of the surveys that are going around at the moment indicate that climate change is a huge concern to residents. And I know that there's a lot of conservative, or what we call teal independents, making very, very strong direction in Sydney and Melbourne, and could win a number of seats. So I think council was very much correct in addressing that issue in their corporate plan. We also have growing issues about homelessness, not because of anything but a shortage of housing. And I think that council with state government will all be in a bit of a collaboration to try and cover that. Now, I don't want to go down the stream here with some problems that may not be what I call major direction of this council, when in fact there could be other things on the horizon. The homelessness really concerns me because people are becoming economic refugees, not because they're not working, they've got jobs, not because they're finding they can't get anywhere because there's nothing available to them. So obviously the federal direction here in who wins the election, that could play a part in how that's rectified. But if it's not rectified, we're going to have people living in caravans, living in cars, and we're going to be asked as one of the governments to help address that. So I'm thinking that we park this and sort of like tread water a little bit, because I don't think we know completely what direction we're going in. I'm a little bit concerned. We lay ourselves a little bit too thin. We were successful in getting the location of government services to Logan through this program. Some suggest that we were probably too successful in doing that, and we've got other issues as a result of that. My concern obviously is unemployment. The Mayor's task force is doing a great job, particularly with young people who haven't got employment, but are being connected to people in Logan who need people like these. So I don't want to have too many programs going at the one time. I want to see some direction from the state government to what they want us to fix. I suspect homelessness is going to be a big issue. And finding someone, I would not be interested in proceeding with this program unless we found someone that's going to steer a very, very strong ship. The success of City Choice was really because of the chair. She was an ex-CEO of Brisbane City Council, and she made some amazing discoveries along the journey in connections and getting things across. And I'm just thinking, can we just park this for a little bit? Because the first thing I'd want to know is, have you got someone that's going to be strong enough and successful enough to drive this program? Otherwise, I'm not interested.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, can I get the CEO to come up, because there seems to be some confusion around what the next step is. But just to be very clear, the motion before you is to discontinue City of Choice. There won't be a chair of anything. Yeah, but the secretary says we're going to bring up a report. But there won't be a City of Choice equivalent. It'll be gone. Gone. So, what I want the CEO to speak to before we go to Councillor Jeremiah and Councillor Wilcox, so that we've just framed it around what the report is rather than what we've had in the past, is what that Transform Logan, whatever you want to call it, looks like and what the intention is. Because my understanding is the organisation measuring metrics that we've never done before, so that we can identify our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats when we're focusing our resources. But I could be wrong, so I'll let the CEO speak to it, because it's his office that will develop the program.
Thanks, Chair. So I suspect that everyone in this room is in these jobs because they want to make change for the city. And at the moment, our corporate documentation is an ops plan, which is 1 year, and a corporate plan, which is effectively 4 years. In government terms, it's a relatively short time frame. If you want to make significant changes, and I think we're in a position in this council and in this city that this council can make some substantial decisions which set a course for the city over a very long period of time, that makes significant decisions now, sets a course for the council over a long period of time, that creates significant change and sets up the city for generations to come. You'll see a report that's coming through the committee today about an innovation district. That's the sort of things which we're talking about, things which might take 20 to 30 to 40 years to come to fruition, that create a substantial benefit for the people of the city. Having those things is an important target. What we're talking about here is creating a framework around which this council, so to answer Councillor Bradley's question, who decides, it'll be this council that gets to decide what those directions are, and then that allows the organisation to respond and deliver on those programs of work over a longer period of time. So some of those things are quite hard to do, but if you want to achieve something that's really hard to do, you need to start now and have a longer term plan to do it. That's what this would give us. So in terms of what comes back later on this year, it would be a framework for that. In the intervening period, we'll run through briefings of the council and allow you to help set that direction. And then decide on it at the end of the year. You may have heard me talk about in the past of a mission-based approach, setting a series of missions for the city over a longer period of time. This is the vehicle to do those sorts of things and allow this council to if you like, set the city on a pathway which creates substantive transformation over the longer term.
Thank you very much, Mr. CEO. I have Councillor Jeremiah, Councillor Wilcox, Councillor Bradley and Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 3 of the report, it states that in February of 2021, Council resolved to establish an internal steering group that's made up of councillors and council officers. I wanted to ask, what councillors were a part of that internal steering group?
Sorry, I don't have the list in front of me, but it was certainly the majority of councillors.
Councillor Heremyre, it was everyone except for Councillor Bradley, the Mayor, me and Councillor Karansky.
And with that internal steering group, was it a part of their recommendation to create a program such as Transform Logan?
No. So the recommendation of that steering group was to write to the state and federal governments seeking their support for a phase 3 of City of Choice, which we did. We did not get a response to our letter from the state government, and the response we got from the federal government was essentially avoided answering the question. It just spoke about existing initiatives. So the second aspect of the decision that council made, that in addition to the steering committee, was to then come back to council if there was going to be a significant change in strategic direction, which is what we have done here. We've come back and said we think that this is the strategic direction that council should go in. We would have preferred to have gone and convened another meeting of the steering committee for them to actually discuss this report before it came to committee, but time was against us in doing that. So we then instead offered briefings to councillors who were interested in hearing about this report before it came to committee. We did give briefings to Councillor Karansky and Councillor Fraser, and we also did briefings to the chair of this committee and the deputy chair. So that was the process that we went through to come to this recommendation.
So my understanding of previous council decisions is that in 2021, council asked an internal steering group to go away and provide advice and direction regarding the future of City of Choice, and then bring back a report. And the report was brought back, and it recommends that the program be discontinued, but it also mentions a Transform Logan program. Now, I think the issue with City of Choice over the past couple of years is that it hasn't had buy-in. And right now, Transform Logan doesn't have buy-in either. I think there's already processes and procedures in place that fulfill the role of long-term visions like what the CEO's mentioned, and I don't think we need another think tank on top of that to confuse it even more. So I'd like to echo what the Mayor mentioned, and when appropriate, Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose that out of the two recommendations, only the first recommendation is voted on. So the first recommendation says that City of Choice be discontinued, and then the second recommendation talks about bringing back a report regarding Transform Logan. I'd like to propose that we only go forward with discontinuing City of Choice, and we don't bring back a report regarding Transform Logan.
Thank you, Councillor Heremyre. Your amended motion is noted, and I'll test it on the floor when the time comes. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Raven, for requesting the CEO pop up, because that's what I was going to do. I agree. I think number one, I'm happy to support number one, and I partially agree with part two, but I've also had a briefing on a report that's coming through for governance, and I can see parallels for this report which would support something else that's coming up in governance, which I can't talk to. But I'm wondering, I don't know if Darren Scott can reply or anything. So for me, I would push the second part back until governance comes through, and push the second part to June so that we can see if the parallels fit in.
That's okay. I understand you're speaking to a confidential report. Do you want to respond, Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so that refers to a confidential report that's coming up in this round. It's quite clear that they are related. So what we are seeking to do is to have, as mentioned through the budget workshops, clear control on how council delivers its projects. So making sure that we do have a strong portfolio management arrangement for how council delivers its projects. That's confidence around its deliverability. This is the other limb to that, which is understanding what council is asking the organisation to deliver in the longer term. So understanding where we're going and then making sure we get there are the two limbs of what's required to be successful. This is the understanding where we're going in the very longer term. This group is the one which would decide that. So there wouldn't be another think tank generated. This would be the group that decides those things. So nothing out of the ordinary from a council business perspective. Just the time frame is a longer term time frame that you're thinking about. And the second limb is the delivery of it, which is the confidential report. Both things are required if you ultimately want to be successful in a longer term time frame.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm probably with Councillor Wilcox on this and partially with Councillor Herrenmeyer. I am mindful, I don't want to ask what specifically that is, but I do have an element of interest and curious in this overarching project management, but I am concerned it's not going to address my issues that I have. And I do understand my issues, so please don't think that I don't. Yeah, I'll just park it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. So what I'm going to do, councillors, is I'm going to break this down into two separate votes because it sounds like there's clarity on the first part of the motion and less clarity on the second part of the motion. So I'll put that, we'll just do that clause 1 stands on its own as a vote to be done initially as an amended motion, if you're comfortable with that, councillors, because that seems like the will of the room. I'm seeing heads nodding. And then we'll move on to whether the next one is deferred, changed, whatever you decide to do. So, councillors, I have an amended motion on the screen. The City of Choice Phase 3 initiative is outlined in the report of the DICT dated 17 May, be discontinued by council. Would someone like to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Would someone like to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Karansky. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much, councillors. We'll now deal with the Transform Logan part of the report, and I'll speak to that before we go in. I note that when the recommendation comes, the original recommendation is essentially calling for a report so we can have a better understanding of Transform Logan and what it looks like, whatever it may be called. Listening to thank you, Councillor Karansky, I'll put you on the list. Listening to Councillor Bradley and a curiosity about what it could entail, but not having enough detail to really make a decision on it, and the Mayor's position that need more information, can't decide on it because the uncertainty of the federal election. It sounds like a report that comes back to council that actually outlines what that would entail and what would be involved in that program, any costs that might be associated and what benefits might come with that would be valuable to help councillors make a decision on whether or not it's valuable. I agree with the CEO that if you want to achieve these big missions, you have to start somewhere and you can't just do business as usual. You have to change things up. And my personal position is I would support seeing the report come back so we can understand what that looks like, what it costs and what's involved and why it would be different from what's gone in the past, because I agree with the Mayor that if we're just going to do more of the same, then it's not going to work, and I'm not particularly interested in that, but I can't tell from the information in this report. I need to understand more detail, which is why I'd be comfortable with that report coming back to council in November with the detail so I could understand it better and make a decision about what the mission might look like and how we would measure the mission. Is that, Mr. CEO, is that essentially what the goal of clause 2 was? Okay, cool. That's what I was...
That's correct. The ability for me to report back to this council what we propose as far as those longer term missions might be.
And council might not be supportive of what that looks like, and that's fine. But at the moment, I agree with the sentiment of Councillor Herrenmeyer, Councillor Wilcox, that we don't have enough information to really make that decision in this report, which is why we need a report to come back that gives us the detail. So I'll be supporting moving clause 2 as a standalone motion on the basis that I want to know more, and I can't make a decision with what's in front of me, but I also don't want to sideline it in case I miss out on a great opportunity. Councillor Karansky, did you want to speak to the motion? Thank you, Councillor Karansky, and I've got Councillor Bradley, and then I'll speak again. Thank you, Councillor Bradley.
And thank you for allowing me to speak again, Chair. I really appreciate that. I'm probably with Councillor Karansky on this in that the area I represent just hasn't really seen anything from this transformational area of council, and I do believe if it goes back to where it was, we're just going to have a revolving door continuously. So I do support the briefings. I do support even one-on-ones before a report comes up, because I think that's where you'll get a different perspective.
And through you, Chair, as you know, we've got another round of one-on-ones coming up in the next couple of weeks with all of the councillors, and we can address that at that point.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Wilcox.
Just wondering, you've got November 2022. Is there room that it could happen before November 22, so we could just date it as a future meeting? Rather than being specific, dating it 6 months from now, so you could bring it forward?
The CEO says he's comfortable with that. If the committee is comfortable with that amendment, I'm happy to put it to the floor. Does anyone object to a change to a future meeting? No objections. Councillors, you have a motion on the screen to call for a report from the Chief Executive Officer, noting Councillor Karansky's comments, and I agree with her that by the time we get to whenever the report comes back, the report you're referring to, Councillor Wilcox, will have been resolved. It'll probably be a bit clearer where it sits, and it'll be easier for the CEO to articulate that. Councillors, the motion is on the board. Would anyone like to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Stemp has seconded that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Hall. How do you vote?
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillors, that brings... Oh, sorry, and Councillor Herrmeyer.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Herrmeyer. Councillors, that brings us to the end of item 4.2. We'll now move on to item 4.3, which is the Council Government Grants Advocacy Program Process Review 2022. I note that this is a confidential report. Before I move into discussions, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, I note it's considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as the confidential attachments contain information relating to a confidential council process that impacts the way council makes decisions, including its business processes regarding grant decisions. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item? There being none, I'll let the Director speak to his report, noting that he can't talk about anything confidential.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Morning, councillors. I'll take the report as read and just make some brief remarks. Following councillors' request to the CEO for a report on the grants process back in February, Advocacy, with the support of the Business Transformation Branch, undertook a detailed business process improvement review of the grants process. We've identified a number of process improvement opportunities that we're looking forward to taking councillors through at a future point in time in a briefing. Those process improvement opportunities, we believe, fall into two categories. The first category is simple process improvement reviews, or changes, I should say, that will improve the process, particularly for councillors. And we also believe that there's some more significant changes that will require a longer period of time to implement. And what we propose is in the coming months that we'll actually brief councillors on those changes with a view to implementing them before the next grant scheme process initiates. Happy to take any questions.
Councillors, do you have any questions, noting that you can't ask about the confidential parts of the report? No, excellent. The motion is on the screen. Would anybody be happy to move the motion? Thank you, Councillor Bennon. Would someone like to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Karansky. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the ICT reports. Mr. Director, do you have any GB for us?
I do not, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillors, do you have any GB for the Director? There being none, thank you very much. Back to work with you. Have a great day. Councillors, we'll now move on to item 5.1. Submission on the proposal to decriminalise the sex work industry in Queensland, noting that the submission is being requested by the state government, that this isn't being driven by council. Before we move into discussion on this matter, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare at this time? There being none, can the Economic Development and Strategy Manager, Mr. Dave Radish, please speak to this report and keep it clean, son.
Through the chair, so there is a consultation paper out at the moment to gauge local government's interest in some reforms to decriminalise the sex industry. So there's particular parts that relate to planning and development in our planning scheme. Christian Parks leads the planning scheme, and the current planning scheme, including the development of a new planning scheme, so he's best placed to talk to this report.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Radich. This report considers the planning rules that apply to the sex work industry. The report recommends that the ED&S manager and the committee chair be delegated authority to make a submission on behalf of council. The key points that we would like to emphasise in the submission are: 1, the state should continue to be the regulating authority for sex work. 2, the state should continue to licence sex work businesses. In fact, we suggest that the submission should recommend that this be expanded to include single operators and not just brothels. So that's an expansion from the current operation. 3, we're suggesting that the state should strengthen the regulation of home-based business sex work to include requirements such as separation distances, similar to the controls that we've got within the current planning scheme for adult shops. It should explicitly restrict children from the premises, and there should also be a requirement to notify neighbours when a licence application is received. The consultation paper included a series of questions. The planning development component of those questions is included in this report. Within the report, we've attempted to draft some very brief responses to those questions, just to give committee an understanding of the tone that we'd like to take with that submission. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to take any questions.
He could feel himself wandering into pun territory there, and he stopped. Wise decision, Christian. Councillors, are there any questions, or is someone happy to move the report? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, reading the report, and I agree that we should put a submission in. My concern is closing date for submission is 3rd of June. And I thought we could have maybe had a look at a response, so we could debate the response. That's probably the issue, is that we're going to probably disagree on some of those issues that are going to be put in that response.
Through the chair, I think the issue is that it's not a given that this is really for council to respond to. There are some planning elements which we're trying to deal with, but the reason to bring it to committee in this way is that we get some agreement that council does see a role for ourselves to respond, and then we'll then use the time and efforts of officers to productively prepare that submission in
I guess you're saying trust us, we'll get it right.
That's exactly what I'm saying, through the chair.
Would you like to be consulted on the report, Mr. Mayor? You want on the response?
I would like to look at the report.
That sounds good.
I think I'll take a very conservative view. When I say conservative, I'm not.
Don't change much.
I don't mean political. Yeah. I mean a view in that, obviously, and I think the chair should be involved as well. Not that we just want to look at it politically, whether or not, because this will be for public viewing, I would imagine, and we would obviously like to see that final submission so that it's possibly maybe worded better, or no major changes, but I would suggest that we would be concerned about how it looks in the public, because there's going to be quite a view on this out in the general public, and I think we just need that safeguard that we don't get that I'm not suggesting that it's going to be a bureaucratic response, but what I'm suggesting is we just like to make sure that it's not a bureaucratic response and it is quite a responsible response. And looking into the report, there are needs to address certain issues in there, and I would expect that there would be some parts of the current legislation still implemented, particularly around schools and that type of thing. So I'll leave it at that.
Mr Mayor, would you be comfortable if the submission is circulated to yourself and all councillors before it's actually made? Yeah, there we go. Excellent. I'm getting head nods all around. Councillor Bradley.
Yeah, that was my suggestion, thank you, through the chair, that that we have it before next week, if possible. Just in my time as a councillor, I've had some interaction with, well, not personally, but I've had complaints, put it that way, of illegal activities happening without approval, not in Division 1 anymore, but in 3, there you go. Yeah, I would definitely like to have input into the letter. I understand you have an overarching response in your mind and you've expressed that, which I appreciate. But I would like to have input into the letter. Thank you.
So if we were to provide a draft of the letter to councillors beforehand for feedback, would that make councillors more comfortable so you can include that feedback? Councillor Heremiah?
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you for taking the initiative to reach that compromise. Something that I'm quite over in committee is signing a blank cheque. What happens a lot is that we get recommendations to support an authorisation to make a submission or change something to do with different planning or council business without actually understanding what that submission is, because the submission hasn't been attached to what we're voting on. What you're doing is exactly the right thing, trying to compromise and trying to make it work, but the issue is that if I disagree with the submission or words in the submission, I can't go back in time and change my vote today. So since the submission hasn't been attached, I'm not comfortable with signing a blank cheque, and therefore I will be abstaining from this vote.
Thank you, Councillor Heremiah, for explaining your position. Dave?
Through the chair, so we had a decision whether we provide an officer submission which would have met the timeframes, or we elevate this up to council to get a direction. We couldn't meet the timeframes because of agenda shutting, so we couldn't prepare a submission in time for this round of committee's agenda shutting. So what we've decided to do is come to council, because we feel this is an important matter for council to be aware of, because it relates to sex industry in the residential and commercial areas of the city. We've provided some draft direction, and we are more than happy, and our usual business process is to circulate a draft submission before we send it to the state government. So those are the decisions we had to make. Is this important enough to raise to council? We felt it is, and I feel like the council thinks it is too, and it's better than doing that as just providing a submission from the Economic Development Manager.
Thanks, Dave. And do you think your branch will be in a position to provide a draft before we vote on it in ordinary council next week?
Through the chair, most definitely.
So that way councillors will be able to see what the draft submission looks like before they cast their final vote, so you may be in a position to change your position from abstain to against or in favour depending on the outcome of that. I've got Councillor Wilcox and Councillor Bradley.
I've just got one real quick question. When did notification come through for this that we needed to provide a submission then?
Through the chair, I don't have that date to hand. In my mind, it was approximately 3 weeks ago.
I don't think committee reports were closed 3 weeks ago, so, or were they?
Through the chair, committee agenda shut 2 weeks ago.
All right, I'm happy to go so long as we get it before ordinary council next week.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Bradley.
With that in mind, with the sentiment in the room in mind, I would like to amend that to be deferred for full council, and once we get the letter, then support it.
But the intention being to see the draft and support it through, because the main thing that the staff are trying to seek is making sure we do want to actually make a submission, because that's why they didn't get to this point. Fantastic. Understand your position there. Dave, you comfortable with that? Thank you, councillors. We'll just put an amended motion on the board because it seems like that would make councillors more comfortable being able to see the draft prior to ordinary council. Councillors, you have a motion to defer the consideration of this to the ordinary council meeting. Would someone like to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Power has seconded that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is carried 8. I am against. Who else didn't vote? Could you put your hands back up again so I can go around and check who didn't vote? Councillor Avers against. Councillor Russell?
Against.
Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Fraser? Oh, you were in favour. Okay. And Councillor Murphy, were you in favour? Yep, all good. Did you get them all? You were against, sorry, Councillor Bennett? Yep, thank you. And Councillor Kransky was in favour, weren't you, Councillor Kransky? Yes, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, just clarification before we go any further. So the report will be based on planning grounds, not moral grounds. So we're not debating the issue itself or the proposal by the state government. We're putting in a submission on planning grounds of how these
should be regulated.
Places should be operating. Just wanted to clarify so that people understand that we're not voting on the moral issue, we're voting on the planning provisions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very, very astute of you to point that out. Councillors, we'll now move on to item 5.2, which is a place-based approach to innovation districts. Before we move into discussion on this item, do any councillors have a conflict of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, I'll let Dave speak to his report.
Thank you, and through the chair. So the purpose of this report is to create more high-value jobs in Logan for local people. We're planning to do this by using a specific geographic investment attractions strategy by driving investment into a geographic area that is noted in the report as the Underwood Innovation Precinct. Within this innovation precinct, there is Go One, which is a startup company, a unicorn that has a long history with council. We've supported them a number of times, and we feel that it would be good to have more companies like Go One in the city. So the report gives an overview of the economic boom that we've seen over the last 5 years. We've seen many of our industrial areas reach completion. We have the Maple Tree, the Point Corp development, a lot of land in Berrinbar, Logan Home, being fully sold, contracted or committed. What we're seeing is a boom in industrial and warehouse and logistics. That hasn't resulted in any significant changes to our unemployment rate or our self-containment rate. So our unemployment rate still remains high at 8.2. What we are seeing is with these larger industrial sheds, when we first saw these areas develop, they were about 5,000 square metres and had about 100 people working in them. With the movement of technology, the development of automated warehouses, we're now seeing 2,000 to 20,000 square metre buildings that only contain 50 to 100 people working in them. So this is an issue that we need to address. We have had some success in a place-based approach to drive investment in Meadowbrook. So Meadowbrook was notioned as the health and wellness precinct. We have now seen three proposed private hospitals in those areas, and private hospitals bring with us thousands of additional jobs. We've seen another great health investment in Springwood with the Springwood Health Hub. Again, we'll see more jobs happening there, but my concern as the Economic Development Manager, are we creating enough opportunities for people within the city? While we have had a lot of success in the warehouse and logistics space, we feel like a targeted approach, which we haven't tried before in Underwood, will pay off. people do want to be around other like-minded businesses such as Go One. The report recommends that we invest in this area, we start to look at some incentives to encourage development in this area, and ultimately over time we could look at some planning scheme provisions to really revitalise this area. We've looked at the industrial estate, and yesterday I drove around it. There's some businesses in the industrial estate. It's quite an old industrial estate. It was developed in the 80s, so that's giving it about a 40-year lifespan. It's got very little constrained land on it. It is ready for revitalisation. It's got good access to and from the highway. It's next to Low Oval also, and we feel that a targeted investment attraction strategy to generate some high value jobs in this area would be beneficial for the city. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dave. I have questions from Councillor Jeremiah Stamp, Bradley and Raven.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question regarding page 3 of the report. And on page 3, there's a figure that outlines the area of this innovation district. It's a big red shape and it goes around different roads. And I was curious what determined this area, because I noticed that about 50 metres outside this area to the west of Kingston Road, just above Compton Road, there's the Compton Technology Park. And I would have thought that that's the perfect sort of properties to be in this area, but it seems like it wasn't decided to include them. Also, to the east of the Technology Park, there's a number of warehouses that have already been converted to support high-value jobs. So I'm confused as to why that area wasn't included in this innovation district.
So the whole area on page 3 talks about an investigation area for future investigation. What we're really focusing on is the yellow hatched area, which is the first part of this investigation where Go One is. That's where some of the incentives and the recommendations apply to. But throughout this investigation, we could expand it. We could continue to look at areas within the city. One of the findings from the employment land study was our mixed use zone, which predominantly this investigation area covers, hasn't been operating as well as it should, because there's 48 different uses that you can do in that zone, and council did resolve to refine some of those uses. So it's a broader investigation area, but the hatched yellow is the first stage of that.
Going forward, I'd recommend that council officers include the technology park in their overall area if it's about innovation and high value jobs. Talking about that initial area, I notice on page 4 there's this rendering of the different buildings that could be in that hatched area in the future, and I notice that there's different grey squares and rectangles that I assume are buildings. I'd like to ask for some clarification around this map and what it means.
So this map is, through the chair, so this map is a visualisation. Those squares are building footprints allowed under the current planning scheme, so it's just to get an idea of what could develop in this area. We felt it was a good image to show what the potential of this area could be.
And do these buildings and footprints line up with current property boundaries?
Through the chair, the majority of them do. There are some that cross over boundaries, so that would mean that there'd need to be some amalgamation of properties. In this area, there's 72 different landholdings, so it is an area with multiple land holdings, but we're hoping that when we start this process, we can have a discussion with the business owners and the landlords in the area and see what their thoughts for the future of this area could be.
And with technology parks and any large development, amalgamation tends to be quite a usual thing. And what I've noticed in my electorate is that when you do amalgamate land, it gives you the ability to build master planned estates like what this rendering shows. When you looked around the city and you looked at different areas to make this initial innovation focus area, did you consider land holdings and different owners? Because I think that that has a big impact on the success of an area as to whether you can amalgamate those lots and build properties that support high-value jobs. Was that taken into consideration?
Yeah, through the chair, it certainly was. And what we're seeing in the mixed-use zone is a lot of smaller parcels of land which are primed for amalgamation. But if you look under the risk section of this report, it does mention fragmented land as a risk. And it is often easier when you have one parcel of land and one developer controlling that. But what this is pointing out is under the risks that it might be a longer term project for council. Certainly in the 5 to 10 year mark to see some of this land transform.
With determining the areas that innovation districts go, from my perspective, there's a great area with land that's already been amalgamated with properties that are already taking their own initiative to create high-value jobs, and that area is in the Crestmead Industrial Estate. Council and state government already have plans to put more infrastructure in that area. In the future, the hope is that there will be an extension from the gateway which will allow that infrastructure to be there to support these high-value jobs. I understand this area is right next to the M1, so it has that infrastructure and public transport, but is there scope in the future to introduce a similar sort of innovation district, but over in the west, over in the Crestmead Industrial Estate, over in the extension of that Crestmead Industrial Estate? So the west also gets the focus on high-value jobs that tends to be reserved for the east right now.
Through the chair, so we can certainly look at that. Dave and I have had experience trying to drive high-value jobs in the Crestmead Industrial Estate, and the market wasn't there. They thought it was too far away from population bases. They felt that the area was more primed for industrial development, and that's effectively what we have seen. We did try to drive a high-tech business park outcome there, but the market wasn't that interested. So I think it's more around this site where we could do the first, the core. We have a look at the first area for investigation and see how that goes, and then we could see what the successes are and roll it out to future parts of the city. This is something we haven't tried before.
I'll just let the director add on to that because he had something to contribute.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Councillor Heremai, the other great success story with this approach is Meadowbrook over the recent years, and it's not because we sort of focused on identifying the land so much. It was chasing the great businesses and the great relationships that council has had. So the Griffith Unis, the Metro South Healths, UQ, that has what. And then wrapping a sort of a governance model around that where everyone turns up regularly to try to amplify the outcomes of each of those players. That's the model that we've looked to Underwood to extend, so, and that's where Go One kind of comes in as a great business that have their own aspirations to make their, achieve sort of a campus-style vision around their own facility where they're attracting like-minded businesses in their own right. This is about what council can do to amplify that in that location. So I think Crestmead is a great example where over time you will see those great businesses, they're already there. The tone and the type of those businesses will change over time, and that's absolutely, this model is what we could then replicate across the city, but it'll be a great business-led advancement of the concept rather than just try to spread it out geographically, for instance. So there is some great advantages if we can get this right in Underwood as well as Meadowbrook.
And thank you for that. And in terms of business-led, I think that the Crestmead area, and Councillor Raven, I'm sure, would agree that it is being business-led. There we have the largest warehouse and logistics development in the Southern Hemisphere under construction. You can already see the later stages of the Point Corp development bringing those higher value jobs, and I really look forward to the possibility in the future of council officers bringing back a similar report that focuses on jobs but in the areas where development applications are getting approved, like Crestmead and Park Ridge.
Thank you, Councillor Harrimeyer, and I think you're right, a precinct in that area in the future is going to be fantastic. Might not be an innovation precinct, might be something else completely different, because the businesses that are moving in there will set the tone, like you say. So yeah, well said. Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Just want to get some clarity on a few things. So, high-value jobs, what sort of businesses employ create high-value jobs? I guess I'm trying to get my understanding of that. What type of businesses are they?
Through the Chair, so there's a few in Logan. There's Metro South Health, so the hospital has high-value jobs. Go One has high-value jobs. Logan City Council has high-value jobs. Tees Abattoir has some high-value jobs. So these are typically jobs that are not casualised jobs. These are jobs where people often have to study a tertiary degree to achieve. And the evidence suggests that a lot of highly qualified people are in Logan, but they are having to travel to Brisbane and Gold Coast to find work. So that's why that containment rate is fairly low, and would like there to be more opportunities for local jobs.
So this area then, obviously, are there businesses, I guess high-value job businesses, that are looking for an area such as this? Is there quite a demand for, say, businesses to come into Logan, high-value job businesses that are looking for a location, but we can't find them a location, which is why we're trying to create something like this?
Through the Chair, yes. So there are a lot of businesses that want to come to Logan. One of the challenges has been that when my investment attractions team go out, Logan is a large area and there's lots of different opportunities for people to establish themselves in Logan. If we had more of a targeted geographic area with more of a prescriptive brief that my team could give people that are looking to invest in Logan, they would have certainty of where they could go, where council's aiming at, and an innovation district itself is a way to show the market that council wants to have some high-tech, high-value jobs in a specific area within the city, as opposed to spreading it too thin.
I guess my concern too is that, this area, there's businesses in there probably 40 years old, as you mentioned, from the 80s. They've been there a long time. My concern is moving forward, are they going to want to move? If so, where do they move if we're trying to get an innovation hub? Because they're also employing, they're also good businesses, they've been in our area for a long time. I guess that's my concern, is where do we direct these businesses if we're encouraging other business to come in?
So through the Chair, so it'll be a decision of the market whether they want to move. There'll be no council decision that moves any of these businesses on. They can remain there. There's some fantastic businesses, some iconic businesses like Big Gun Butchery is in this area. So if businesses are moving on, my team has a long history of helping businesses find other locations within the city, so we keep those local jobs local.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stemp. Councillor Bradley, myself and Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, through the Chair. I know this area quite intimately, and I was with council officers when Go One wanted to go into Naughty But Nice, whatever that was called back then, and now they've grown, and they did express exactly this right from the start. They must be just laughing at the moment. Not only have they got money from council for the innovation side of things within council, but they're going to be having planning schemes sort of changes by the look of it. So this used to be in Division 1 from 2008 when I was first elected until the last election. And so I've spoken to a lot of businesses, a lot of owners in the area, a lot of residential around. I know the residential would be so happy, the residents surrounding would be happy for this sort of theme. However, I do have concern with the businesses that are there, RSPCA, Lifeline, we've got car dealers, we've got printers, we've got all sorts of things all in amongst the scheme of things. Like, what engagement, what discussions have been had with those business owners? If this is just thrown on them, I'm concerned about that. Can you please elaborate?
Through the Chair, so the plan is to engage with those businesses to show them what Council is thinking about doing. There's no, the decision to rezone is a decision that this Council will have to make as part of a new planning scheme, but no decision today will displace a business. What we're looking to do is try to send a signal to the market that there is an opportunity within Logan if you're looking to develop some high value jobs, some tech-based jobs, and this is where we'd like you to go. As I said, there's 72 different landowners. I don't think that all of them are going to vacate. I think a lot of them will still stay, but there will be a few people that will enter into this area to try to revitalise it, I guess.
And I appreciate your sentiment, what you're saying here. And I would just really like to emphasise that the consultation with the business owners and sensitivity around that is so important. I'm assuming, but please clarify, page 44 or page 4 of the report, you'll be asking for funding from Council to improve that area visually by the look of that?
Through the Chair, there hasn't been a lot of investigation into that, but there could potentially be some streetscaping work or some public art that we could roll out into this area.
Okay.
Again, that will be subject to consultation with the business owners to see what's important to them, not dissimilar to the summit process.
Okay. So in the process, if you wanting to stretch it down to the Kingston Road sort of area as well, past Compton Road, will you be pushing to remove that from the Springwood local plan area as well?
Through the Chair, sorry, what part are you looking at?
The Slacks Creek side.
Through the Chair, so my team has a workshop with you this week to talk about the local plan and whether this should be removed or which parts should remain in the local plan. So that again will be a decision of Council.
Yeah.
Not a decision that relates to this report.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand it won't be a decision today, but you know very well I've been pushing for that for a long time because Slacks Creek and Springwood are not Springwood. So, yeah.
That is the discussion that my team will have with both you and Councillor Russell this week.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose probably my biggest point is to make sure that the business owners and lessees are consulted.
Yep. Look, I take that your point, and we have a long history in ED&S of consulting businesses through the summit process and during the rollout of capital works in the process. So we held 6 city centre summits, and that was effectively what we would be imagining would be doing here, but on a smaller level. So I take your point, sensitivities around relocation of businesses, but we'll talk to all of those 72 landowners.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I have myself, Deputy Mayor Wilcox and Councillor Russell. Dave, so just clarifying that what this report does today is gives you a direction from Council that you can proceed to the planning work needed to add this to the planning scheme decision that comes over the next 18 months or so.
Through the Chair, yes, that's correct.
So we're not voting on a planning scheme change. We're not voting on we're not going to flick a switch and tomorrow it's an innovation district. Today we're starting a process and you just want Council's support to do that. So you're not just going off and doing it and dumping it on us later.
That's correct. I want support, a general direction that this is an innovation precinct which we can try to attract jobs in, and then that will be reconsidered as part of the development of a new planning scheme.
Awesome, thank you. So, go on, Mr. Mayor.
Just a question, most important thing, the divisional councillor, you've worked with her to establish whether she's in agreement, because she's not here at the moment. That's
No, it's Councillor Russell.
Oh, I thought it was Councillor Lane.
So
I'm sorry. Okay, so Councillor Lane, you've worked. Councillor Russell, you've worked with the planning officers on this, and you're in full agreement. Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll continue. So, in speaking with Go One about the vision that Councillor Bradley referred to, that they've got about a campus setup, and trying to understand, because they're a unique company within the country. They're $1 billion edutech business, and they are bringing people from the Gold Coast and Brisbane to work in Logan. And I had a discussion with them some time ago saying, what are the barriers to entry for your staff? Because what they want is really good staff. They want the best staff in the world to be working for them, whether they work in Logan or in their US-based offices. And I said, what do you need to make it better? And he said, we need more workability features. I'm like, what's a workability feature? He goes, well, a livability feature is something that makes a city nice to live in. I need something that I can say to my employees, when you come and work for me, there's not just my business, but there's other like-minded businesses nearby, and there's all of the soft businesses, the ancillary businesses that support us, be that a bit of a bougie coffee shop where they can go and enjoy, do a lunch meeting, whether it's craft brewery where they can go and have a drink after work and discuss things. And those soft businesses need an intensity of customers in order to exist. So Councillor Stemp's question was fantastic. Why not just let them spread out across the city? Why make a precinct? Because when you bring high value jobs into one location, then there's other jobs that get created around them. And you've heard myself and Dr. Scott talk about the 5X economy before, where you create one high value job and it creates 5 other jobs near it. If you can create 500 high value jobs in one area, one precinct, you will create 5 times that many jobs, 2,500 jobs around it to support those high value people. So you actually have this multiplier effect where even you create a precinct where you focus investment and you focus high value jobs so that local people can get those jobs, and they will be the young people who are in high school right now who understand more about clean tech, more about innovation than any of us in this room ever will. They will be able to get those jobs with the education they're getting in our amazing schools. And then the people who aren't interested in working in those industries have employment opportunities around them. That precinct is starting to evolve on its own, but if we can put some focus around it and do some placemaking similar to what we've done in Meadowbrook, where you saw a pet food factory turn into a private hospital, that is a great example of taking a small number of moderately valued jobs, not even low value jobs, because manufacturing has good income, but it would have been probably 200 square metres per employee on that site. Now it'll be 30 square metres per employee on that site, which is what we want. Intensity of employment in the right locations so that you can create more jobs around those employment opportunities. So I think this is a great start, and I think we'll see more of this, as Councillor Heremaya indicated, across the city as we understand where we want to specialise different industries and different types of high value jobs. I think it'll be high-tech manufacturing and Crestmead Industrial Estate personally, but we'll see how it goes and what develops there. But as each area gets its own champion, it's Go One, and you see the momentum they create, council can lean in on that momentum, build that governance model where you do have a collaborative, business-led group that says what they want, what they need in the area, and council just gets out of the way, lets them make money and lets them employ people and pay them well. So I'm very supportive of this precinct idea, and I think it's a great model that if it's successful here, we can roll it out in other parts of the city based on the needs of each area to the benefit of the city as a whole. I have Deputy Mayor Wilcox, Councillor Russell, Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Just curious, going back to page 4, that map up the top. So currently it doesn't look like that, does it?
Through the chair, sorry, I don't understand your question.
So the map on page 4, where you've got figure 2, it currently doesn't look like that layout,
Yeah,
does
sorry,
it?
through the chair. No, it doesn't currently look like that. Could in the future.
All right, so have the businesses that are currently there, where it looks like on figure 1, have they all seen what they would like it to look like for figure 2?
Through the chair, so that what they would like to see their area look like would be part of that community consultation that I've been speaking to Councillor Bradley about. So what is important in your area? I believe, Councillor Bradley, correct me if you're wrong, there's a hooning issue in this area. So maybe if we meet with the businesses that they would say, well, maybe if you could create more of a low speed environment, that would be important. That might drive investment into the area.
But they haven't actually seen this figure, have they?
No.
Okay. So I agree with Councillor Bradley. I think the businesses need to be consulted with this because everyone's sitting here talking about high value jobs. And you did say with a high value job, it's not a casual position. Now, I don't know a lot of the businesses in the area, but the ones that I do know that are in that area, a lot of them would have full-time jobs. So for me, that's a high value job because they're full-timers and stuff like that. So my concern is that we are placing, or we are bending over backwards for Go One as a unicorn business, and we are trying to promote more like-minded businesses like Go One into this one particular area at the detriment of the businesses that are already there, because eventually, by the sounds of it, we would like them to move so we can have this as a little precinct like Go One. Now, I'm assuming that the businesses that are currently there have been there probably for quite some time. They're probably owner-operators. They probably own the building. They own the land that it sits on and everything else. So we're essentially going to say, we're not going to move you out. We're not going to ask you to move on, but potentially this is what we would like to happen in this area. So for me, it's like bending over backwards. We want this to look like a unicorn estate because we want all of these businesses to come in here. Which is fair enough, but we also need to be very mindful. This is an existing estate. These businesses are here. They have been here for quite some time, and we're essentially, for me, I'm essentially sitting here going, you're kind of not good enough to sit here anymore. We want more like-minded businesses like Go One. It's probably not really something for you to answer. It's probably more of a statement from me. My only other concern is, and Councillor Russell might be able to answer this, what is the public transport like to get there? Because I know we've all been there and it's a nightmare to park. Is there public transport in the area to sustain people coming from Gold Coast, Brisbane, coming into here, and the parking? Like, are we going to address the parking and those sorts of things? So I'm not sure. Do you know about the public transport?
Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I've actually got so many responses to the conversation that's happened since I've put my hand up. So firstly, I'd like to say thank you, Mr. Chair. You've actually asked most of the questions that I had coming. That's fine. No, you've said it more succinctly than I'm sure I would have anyway. But I just I'm feeling there's a little bit of sense in the room of concern of that this is something scary. This is like what's being discussed here. This is planning. This is how planning works of how cities grow and adapt. Can I just ask, Manager, please, are we kicking anyone out of their buildings? Are we actually resuming anyone's business here today?
Through the chair, no, we're not, and we're not removing anyone's land use rights.
Thank you. I was quite sure that was the case.
Sorry, Councillor Russell. So I don't think Councillor Wilcox was finished, but she wanted to know what the public transport's like, and then you can kick off with your turn.
Okay. I thought this was my turn.
No, she was just asking you if you knew what the public transport was like.
Frustration, because you know the answers. This is the problem. That's why I asked the divisional council.
Yeah.
Thank you. So as far as the public transport goes, look, I'll be honest, I haven't actually caught public transport through the area, so I don't know exactly how it will match a future Underwood that might or might not have a precinct for innovation in it, or that might be more of a question for Dave.
Through the chair, so there is bus routes from Brisbane and to this site, and there is quite a number on Kingston Road, which is a high PT link. So it is available, but the car parking issue is an issue. I'm aware of that.
and an issue that can be resolved when you get new developments, because you can condition better parking layouts. That's the trick. Did you want to add to something to that, Dave?
Through the chair, only to add that that's concerns we've heard from the businesses in the area at the moment. So they're obviously using Currabee Rail Station with their own means of getting workers back and forward sometimes. There is limited public transport, but as we wrap the messaging around this precinct and we aim to increase the amount of workers in there, part of the goals or the measurables of this innovation district will be what's the investment look like from the state to improve that public transport. So it does have a longer play in the likes of public transport, where we'll sell the message, we'll start to get some runs on the board, and much like is happening with Meadowbrook, where they start shifting rail stations and hopefully putting higher frequency services on into the future. We just need that critical mass, and we need this discussion to start that critical mass.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Russell, have at it.
I think I've said most of it now, but I do have it on good authority that we have double-decker buses coming into an adjacent suburb. No, I'm kidding.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Hall, Bannon, and that's it.
For the chair, not so much a question, more of a statement. Look, I know with things like this, with new planning, there are going to be issues that come along with the changes in any place that you'd like to encourage. I know there's going to be road impacts, and there'll probably be parking issues, and especially if we're looking at putting a university, you need a lot of parking for a university. But I have to say, you have to trust in the talent of the people who you're working with, and we have two of the greatest minds sitting here. We have Mr. Hanson, we have Mr. Raddick, and they do have the Midas touch. They do know how to get businesses to come into Logan. Meadowbrook is a perfect example of this. See what they have done there. See the type of businesses they have drawn into that area through planning. So I think we need to have a bit of faith in the great talent that we have here at Logan City Council, and trust that the planning that they're putting forward is going to improve this city. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Hall. Councillor Bannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just think we're complicating it. The Divisional Council definitely wants it. No one's getting kicked out of the thing, so I'm just happy. Guessing you want to move it. Let's get into it and move on. Let's let them do their job.
Against.
Dave, do you have any GB for us?
Through the chair, no, I don't.
Councillors, do you have any general business for the manager? There being none, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll now move on to item 6.1, which is finalisation of local law amendment process, regulation of camping on council-owned or controlled land. Before I refer to the Health Environment Waste Manager, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare on this report? There being none, Michael Adsnicker, I invite you into discussion so you can speak to your report.
Thank you, Chair. Am I on? Yep. Morning, everybody. Firstly, I just want to introduce Ed Jones. He's our Acting Environmental Health Program Leader in Claire's annual leave absence at the moment. So just to recap, the key purpose of this local law amendment is to better equip Council with the legislative tools that we need to assist in resolving issues of camping on council-controlled roads, footpaths, parks, etc., through being able to effectively issue a move-on notice if required. And I really emphasise and stress if required, because it will always be a last step in a process. As we've always done and will continue to do, we will always approach any concerns in relation to camping on roads, footpaths, etc., through a very compassionate and supportive approach, where we take into account somebody who may be facing difficult circumstances and seek to connect those people with the support services they need. to resolve any issues that we may be reported to in relation to camping in these areas. So some of the issues that are reported to us when it comes to people camping on roads, footpaths, etc., include things like inappropriate disposal of waste, rubbish, wastewater, etc., presenting road safety hazards, driver distraction, and even where people may be establishing themselves in a relatively inconspicuous area, like down the end of a dirt track or something. Often these areas are subject to flash flooding and things like that. So there's a range of circumstances where we have good reason to ask the person to find a more suitable location. This is not about triggering any sort of proactive surveillance across the city. We will continue to respond to any concerns based on inquiries and complaints only. Like I said, this is the last step in the local law amendment process. Council's already considered 2 reports on the matter. Firstly, one endorsing the policy position and the most recent one endorsing the draft amendments for public consultation and state interest check. And that step has now been completed. After that process, no material changes have been proposed to the draft local laws, so they are now presented to Council for the final endorsement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. I have questions from Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the Chair. Thank you, Michael, for bringing this report. This issue happens a lot in Division 12, and I just believe that we'll probably see an increase of people camping in council facilities, on the roads, etc., with the current housing crisis. And I'm already hearing that from residents that are under rental stress. But I just wanted to commend the officers, because I have seen firsthand, especially through the floods, where officers have gone to the nth degree to help and assist people to find housing through different divisions within Logan City Council and through to Housing Commission, YFS Access. The council rangers and officers do a brilliant job, and I commend you for your work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. So, Ed, just first time in committee, you've got a copper question. So all of the feedback, the anonymous feedback from the community, was concerns around that this would be targeted at homelessness. Can you assure council that there is no intention whatsoever to target people who are sleeping rough or struggling to find permanent accommodation? And make sure you press your button before you answer.
Okay, thank you for the question. Most definitely, there'll be no plans to proactively go out and search for or regulate against people that are experiencing homelessness or sleeping rough. We'll intend to and will continue to link those people with services as we always have. Thank you.
Fantastic, great answer. Well done. Councillors, you have no further questions? There is a motion for you on the board. Would someone like to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Would someone like to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Bradley. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been moved unanimously. Thank you, councillors. See, so easy, mate. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the Health, Environment and Waste Manager's reports. Michael, do you have any general business for us? Councillors, do you have any general business for Ed? There being none, thank you, councillors. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bradley.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Michael, obviously we've just had curbside collection in Springwood and there's still a lot of stuff left out. And to be honest, Cleanaway have been amazing even whilst it's been raining. But my concern is more along the lines of when Brett Lee was here, we used to get a daily update as a councillor of where things were up to. So I have no idea what areas have been gone through and not. I believe it went to Division 1's email, but I'm not Division 1. So is it possible to have that feedback given to the councillor?
Yeah, Councillor Bradley, absolutely. I've in fact already discussed the progress reporting of curbside cleanup with the team.
Yeah.
And Cleanaway are actually establishing a GPS type system to get some very accurate progress reports
good.
that I'd like to distribute. Typically we distribute to them, from my memory, sort of at the end of week 1 and then sort of halfway through week 2, so we could, you know, say we finished a couple of days or whatever it is. So that's what I want to implement. So feedback.
Can I also
noted,
pass on? I saw them on the weekend doing.
It was
picking
a
up
tough
stuff.
It was
and
tough going over the last week with the weather,
Yeah.
but they.
I was
yeah,
impressed
yeah.
by that.
That is high praise coming from Councillor Bradley. That is very high praise. Thank you, Michael. Councillors, the Manager for Development Assessment, Stephen Ball, has very patiently waited through everybody else's reports. Do you have any general business for him? Stephen, do you have any general business for us? Thank you very much. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the meeting, closing at 11:13 a.m. The City Infrastructure meeting will begin in 10 minutes at 11:23, chaired by none other than Councillor Tim Fraser, Deputy Chair himself.